I love cryptography. I think it's fascinating, and I'm happy that we have HTTPS so that I can connect to my bank, to my moderately popular YouTube channel. It's a check-in on my Neopets. But that said, oh, come on. I'll get it.
I'm pretty sure I have one of the oldest websites in the world. It dates back to at least 1996, and it hasn't really needed that much maintenance except when AOL went out of business and needed to move it to a new server. It's got a bunch of stuff on it that I would like to keep online, like my first viral hit, The Illustrated Guide to Breaking Your Computer. And, you know, being in the top 5% of the web is no longer impressive. I mean, 99.9999% of the web is now AI-generated cryptocurrency scams and Italian brain rot. So as soon as you type one human keystroke, you're in the top 5% of the web. But, you know, being in Yahoo internet life used to mean something. And here's the thing. I just want my public website to be on the internet and accessible in a web browser. I don't want you to have to log in or give me permission for cookies or enable notifications or it's better in our app. And I don't want you to consent or refuse to consent or to leave open in silent protest the EU General Data Protection Regulation or click to enable Flash Player or Flash Player no longer works or to dodge 150 different pop-ups just to read some of the content on the page. This is obvious to you though. Everyone knows this sucks. But one possibly controversial opinion of mine is that a contributor to this is what I'm going to call today toxic max security. And this is where we turn up the settings on the security like to the max as though it's the most important thing in the world. And it's silly. It scares users. It creates toil and chores for the good guys. And arguably, it reduces security because of alarm fatigue and other issues. Now, of course, lots of people have observed this as well. But this particular toxicity that has set me off for this video is that I was trying to go to my own website and I got this red alert from the Chrome web browser. You've probably seen this before. Attackers might be trying to steal your information from tom7.org. For example, passwords, messages, or credit cards, blah, 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 turn on our security thing. And if you want to get to the site, you can click on advanced and then scroll down to the part where just one last zing in order to proceed to tom7.org, parentheses, unsafe. The reason for this error message is I have never had HTTPS on my site. My website is older than the protocol, for one thing, and I've tried the chore of installing it. It just didn't work, and I don't care. The website is completely public. It doesn't process or contain any private information or anything sensitive in any way. Its privacy policy is lol, and this message is ridiculous. I can tell you for certain that when I was connecting to my own website, there was no attacker trying to steal my credit card. First of all, do we really need to discuss the obvious distinction between stealing a credit card and stealing a credit card number? Second, there's just no place to put a credit card number on my website short of posting it as a comment on my blog, which I guess be my guest. So having seen this error last year, I officially declare that I have beefs with someone on the Chrome product team for preventing users from getting to my website for the sake of toxic max security. Speaking of digital legacy, every time I do a project now, I wonder, is this going to be like the last project that I do before humanity wipes itself out due to world leaders who are too dumb and computers that are too smart?
Now, this video is not going to be epic. It's more like a single karate chop into the solar plexus of good taste. But it's not just an extended petty rant about a time that I saw a warning message on the internet. It's actually an extended petty project about the one time that I saw a warning message on the internet and tried to get some kind of symbolic revenge.
My revenge is called No One Can Force Me to Have a Secure Website. A prepaid self-own by Tom 7, computer science idiot. Now this phrase, prepaid self-own, credit where credit is due, this comes from my friend Reed.
No, I have this now.
He and I like to text each other intricate puns, which sometimes make their way into a video, like Lorem Gypsum here finally did. And speaking of filler, I'm not going to go into all the details in this video. The 25-page paper has all the details, and if you want to argue with me or correct me, the paper contains my official position. And in the paper, you can see all the enhancements I've made to Bovex recently, like SVG support and support for footnotes, which I can't believe I went this long without footnotes. This is going to be like the short version of the story. Here's HTTP and its more complicated younger brother, HTTPS. The S stands for secure, but it's not the letter that makes HTTPS secure. It's the underlying protocol that it uses, which is actually hidden in its name as an Easter egg, TLS. I forgot what TLS stands for, probably like transport layer security. So HTTP, which is the classic one, the protocol starts when someone asks for a web page. It's not going to work for this guy because it's not a touchscreen. HTTP is a really simple text-based protocol. You make a connection to the site, you ask for a specific file, and the server responds on that same request, ideally with the content you were looking for. The worry is that a hacker could watch what you're doing and see what you're requesting and see the files that you get back. The straightforward way to hide it from the hacker is to encrypt the data, both the request and the response. Encrypt the request with the server's key, and then only the server can read it. Encrypt the response with the user's key, and then only the user can read it.
Oh no, you were hacked.
Oops, it doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is really a core challenge that most cryptographic protocols are attempting to address, which is the so-called man-in-the-middle problem. If we suppose that the hacker can intercept messages, then what they can do is convince the user to encrypt the request with their own key. Call that key 3, the hacker's key. Then they intercept that and can decrypt it and read what you're looking for. They can re-encrypt it with the actual server key and then send that to the server, get back the response, decrypt that. Gosh, I shouldn't have made these things so big. And then encrypt the response with the user's key and pass it back to them. The user thinks they're talking to the server, but they're really talking to the hacker in between. So HTTPS is mostly about solving this problem. Not the encryption, but how do I know whose keys are whose and who I'm talking to? If I know that I'm talking to the server and I'm using their key, then encryption will solve the rest of the problem for me. The way we address this, I guess for lack of a better way, is annoyingly to introduce a new character, a sort of cop who we absolutely trust. And this is the certificate authority, or there's actually multiple certificate authorities. What they do is give out papers, certificates that endorse that a certain key belongs to a certain domain name. So if I want HTTPS, I need to convince the cop to give me a certificate that says that my key actually belongs to me. And now when someone connects to my server using HTTPS, I present my keys and the certificate that endorses that they actually belong to this domain name. The client can verify the certificate, and then it's able to encrypt the traffic because it knows that it's talking to me. We'll talk about the details of the negotiation and the encryption in a bit. But first I want to get myself mad again about this whole scenario and explain to you why it's so annoying that we have this cop involved. So first of all, who are these root certificate authorities? You can find this in your browser. You'll see some stuff in here that makes sense, and at least in my case, you'll see stuff that doesn't really make that much sense. Like my CAD mouse, my 3D mouse, has installed a root certificate, which I guess is okay. I mean, it has drivers on my computer, so I kind of have to trust it. I think this is there to work around some HTTPS issue, actually mixed content. But it is a little weird that my mouse can sign certificates for my bank website. Then there's a company called Bypass. It just doesn't really sound like the kind of thing you would trust, because it sounds like someone is paying somebody to bypass security, right? Then we've got Firma Profesional, which is a Spanish software company. Makes sense to have these all around the world. These guys have, 5 Google reviews with 2.6 stars. So it's like better than average. So I guess that's worthy. Seems legit. Then we have VTrust, which is not the blockchain one, not the autonomous drones one, and not the CBD gummies, but the CA of I Trust China, the leading state-authorized certificate authority of China. And, I mean, do I trust China? I think when we talk about attackers in this scenario, we are thinking about like state level actors who can do things like influence their state authorized CA. Anyway, it doesn't really matter whether I trust them because this is how HTTPS works. It defines trust this way by the root CAs. And honestly, it's a bit of a racket. If you get in this list, then you can sell certificates to people. And this is a bit of a well-known problem. A, that we don't really trust these CAs that much, and B, that no one wants to be extorted just to have a website online. In 2014, some well-meaning folks, who are good guys in this story, formed a non-profit, mostly automated CA called Let's Encrypt. In 2026, this is the most popular way to get a certificate. Now, since it's automated, it's free, which is great, but it is still a automated cop. And so you need to play by its rules if you want to continue to have a website on the internet. Here's the main way you'd get a certificate from Let's Encrypt. You prepare your key and you send your key and your domain name, your request, to Let's Encrypt. And of course, they don't want to give a certificate for that domain name unless it's yours. And so they send you back a challenge. Prove that you own this website. And they give you back some kind of random token. You put that token in a well-known location on your website, and you say, okay. Then Let's Encrypt visits your website and gets that particular location and sees that it contains the requested token. This demonstrates that you control the website, and so then it issues the certificate. Now, what strikes you as strange about this? Well, the very problem that we're worried about, the man-in-the-middle attack, assumes that the attacker can intercept messages that are going to my website and change them. So a hacker can also go through the Acme protocol, and none of this is encrypted. This is just HTTP, and there definitely are countermeasures for this. But fundamentally, in the default configuration, if I can manipulate requests to your website, or I've hacked your website, then I can absolutely get certificates for your website using this protocol. So that is, in my mind, kind of hypocritical. Make me do all these chores to prevent against a hacker that can manipulate traffic. But if the hacker can manipulate traffic, then they can do the chores themselves. Also, I have one more petty complaint. Do we really need to talk about the green padlock icon? This is not how you use padlocks to secure things. You have to put the loop through two other loops in order to bind them together. If you just lock it, it does nothing. Another arguably easier way to get the green padlock is to have someone else do it for you. Lots of content distribution networks, like say Cloudflare, will let you point your domain name at their servers. They'll do the encryption, and they fetch the content from your actual website, well, over HTTP. This gives the user a green padlock like they wanted, and it gives the server operator not caring like they wanted. So this is an option for me too, because indeed I don't care. But then I need to involve another party, I need to be at the whim of their global outages and security holes, and I might need to even give them my credit card number. And I think this is what the toxic max security people are counting on. If they make it annoying enough, then I'll just roll over and comply. But I don't want them to get what they want, even if it's also more work for me and causes me to suffer. That's the nature of the prepaid self-own. And so I present to you my petty revenge called HTTPV. The V stands for vulnerable, but call me when you're at least HTTPVII, am I right? HTTPV is a program, not a protocol. It runs on my web server as a TLS reverse proxy, which is basically the same thing we just drew Cloudflare doing. It's on the same machine though. So if you connect to it, you can talk HTTPS, and it fetches my website from the local machine, which is considered secure. This is nothing new. What's new is that I did the worst job that I could implementing the HTTPS protocol. Like all good artwork, it begins with constraints. 1, it's essential that this works in real web browsers because I really do want my website to be online, and it must show the green padlock. 2 is when I say vulnerable, I don't mean vulnerable to buffer overflows. I don't want hackers to be able to take control of my computer. I just don't care if the public data on the website is publicly visible to the hackers. Next, I want to do this all myself. There's 3 reasons for this. 1, it's very annoying to security professionals. The first thing they'll tell you is never roll your own cryptography. Somehow this code is too hard for me, a lowly computer scientist. This is also related to the last point. I mean, let's be honest. OpenSSL is 900,000 lines of cowboy C code, and frankly, one of the main sources of security holes on the internet.
Whoa, sick bird.
When I wrote that in the paper, I thought, am I being too hard on it? Maybe they've cleaned up their act. So I checked, and just 3 days prior, there had been several serious vulnerabilities in OpenSSL discovered. This can lead to a crash, denial of service, or remote code execution. So no OpenSSL. If I get owned, I want it to be a self-own. And finally, it's way more fun to write code yourself than to have someone else do it for you. The last criterion is no cheating. It's really easy to make your website insecure by, taking the secrets that people send you and then just mailing them out randomly. The art, from my point of view, is to do this within the protocol itself. HTTPV has been serving my website for about 6 months now. In fact, when I made my last video, which is also about cryptography, I made my friends get our Secret Santa app from my website.
You can find this at tom7.org. I'll just go there, .org/Santa. I recently added HTTPS, actually, although it's not really that S. So you can also...
I wouldn't have been able to spy on them anyway, because the Santa protocol itself does its own encryption. But it did make me giggle to see the secure padlock in the screen caps they sent me as I betrayed their trust.
I definitely like it, but the question in my mind is, can we trust it? Because you could have just built this in such a way that it's kind of feeding you all of our information the whole time and you know everything that's going on.
That is a good
Which is
question.
why Matt's going to take it
by hand.
offline and do it by hand.
I trust Tom more than I trust Matt, personally. So if
I mean, the only contact
Agreed,
I've ever had with
agreed.
Tom has been on Secret Santa video calls for YouTube
And I did
videos.
try to hack.
And I trust Tom more than I
Yeah.
trust Matt, so there you go.
Matt, I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, there that goes. So here are my many errors. When a client wants to connect to a site over HTTPS, they first send this client hello message, and this is unencrypted. It contains a random number that's used for a variety of purposes, and it also says what site you're trying to connect to. This is a bit funny to me. I mean, the IP address that you're connecting to does tell you something about where you're going, but often it's like the whole point is so that people don't know you're going to tom7.org, and HTTPS just sends the name unencrypted as like the first thing. Anyway, the server responds to this with a server hello that contains its own random number. And random number generation is one of the things that the toxic max security people get really worked up about. I figure I trust my bank, they'll do a good job, so I'll just use these numbers. And this makes me feel better about the error message we saw earlier, because now an attacker could be trying to steal my credit card numbers. I also use the same numbers here every single time, and this defeats an important role that these random numbers play in the TLS protocol. We'll come back to that. The server also presents its papers. Now, I didn't find a way to get certificates without actually verifying my site, and so in some sense I'm submitting to the authority here. But Let's Encrypt has endorsed my valid military-grade RSA key. The server also decides which kind of cryptography we're going to do, and I choose RSA and AES in CBC mode, which is a classic cipher that is still universally supported, much to the annoyance of the toxic max security folks. The client can check my certificates if it wants. And the goal of the next step is for the client and server to agree on what encryption keys they're going to use for the actual communication. These are AES keys. The way they do this is the client makes up another random number called the pre-master secret, encrypts that number with the server's RSA key so that only the server can decrypt it. The client and server run the same pseudorandom function, which is defined by TLS, to generate these keys. And they use as input the client random and the server random, which anyone can see who's watching this happen. And they use the PMS, which is an encrypted secret. They both run this function and they come up with the same keys, and then they're able to communicate using regular AES encryption. Of course, I'm leaving out some of the details here, but this is essentially what is going on. Going back to the server hello, I sent my key and my certificate. Not much I can do about the certificate, but I do get to choose my key. So now let's talk about how to artfully botch the creation of my RSA key. RSA stands for Really Secure Algorithm, and you can find detailed descriptions of this many times on the internet. It's a very cool algorithm that's worth learning about. Fundamentally, it's a public key cryptosystem, which means that I can publish my public key and then people can send me secret messages using it. The way I get a public key is I come up with two prime numbers, P and Q. I keep those secret, I multiply them together to get the public number N, and I can publish N. To encrypt a message M, which is just a number, the sender raises M to 65537, one of the fastest primes, and they do that mod N, my public key. This scrambles that number up, and the best way we know to undo that, to recover the original message, is a mathematical trick that involves knowing the size of the group, the multiplicative group, of integers mod N. And that turns out to be p-1 times q-1. I actually talked a bunch about this in my previous video about a similar public key crypto system. So if you are interested in details, you could check that one out. For RSA, I just keep P and Q secret, and then I can efficiently decrypt messages, but no one else can. Now the number n has to be big in order for this to be secure. And Let's Encrypt will only endorse my key if it's at least 2048 bits. But I do get to pick P and Q myself, and no one can force me to do that securely. I mean, they're not even going to know what they are. So one thing I tried is I'll just use a prime that I like 7. That's a nice eponymous choice. But unfortunately, this won't work. Let's Encrypt does make a half-assed attempt to factor your public key. It does this by trying to divide your key by all of the primes up to 757 for some reason. So 7 won't work, that's less. So I used 31337, one of the most elite primes, and Let's Encrypt did endorse this for about a week.
Credentials revoked.
The authority can revoke your certificate if it gets hacked or you ask for it to be revoked. And I don't really know what happened here. I mean, obviously this would be an easy factor to find by just trying a bit more division. So it could have been a security scan. But it also turns out that if you ever reuse a prime, like you use it in more than one key, there's actually a really easy way to find a common factor between two keys using greatest common denominator. So this approach of using vanity primes for my keys, even if I use a big one like this one that I found, it just won't work. My keys are likely to get revoked. Damn it. Are they about to force me to have a secure RSA key? Well, while a normative RSA key is supposed to be the product of two large primes, note that the only thing Let's Encrypt and others see is the public modulus n, which is a composite number. We have fast primality tests, but we don't have any way to test whether a number is the product of two primes short of factoring it. So a very dumb thing to do, which is what I do, is to have an RSA modulus that is the product of more than two primes. And in fact, you can make the math work out and you can still decrypt. My website's RSA key has 16 factors, each of which is about 256 bits. Let's Encrypt happily endorses this key at a military-grade 4096 bits, but in reality, it's more like a baby diaper grade 512 bits. It's completely practical to factor this key for probably a few $100s worth of computing power. Now, this is not an invitation to revoke my key. You can factor it if you want. It's more just an observation that if someone wants to spend money to cause me trouble, they can. I already know that that's the case. By the way, one interesting thing I learned here is that if you find one factor of the key, one of these 16 factors, then you can probably decrypt the traffic. But you actually need a complete factorization in order to sign messages, which is what you need to do in order to revoke the key. So a little bit surprisingly, this key with many factors is actually somewhat resistant to revocation compared to a key with just one weak factor. So that's bad RSA. Now let's talk about bad AES. Going back to the protocol, you now know that my RSA key is hot garbage. Hot, moist garbage. I want to talk about some of the consequences of, rather than using random numbers to encrypt my credit card, using my credit card to encrypt some other data. Remember that the random number in the server hello is always the same thing. Why do these numbers exist at all? These numbers serve several purposes, but the main thing is to prevent replay attacks. If I'm an attacker that is watching these messages be sent back and forth, then I get to see the client and server random values, and I see the encrypted version of the client key exchange. Because that last one is encrypted, I'm not going to be able to figure out what the AES keys are, because the keys are based on those two randoms, but also the unencrypted pre-master secret. But I only saw the encrypted version. But one thing I can do is connect to the server again and replay the client messages that I saw. If I use the same client random as before, and the server uses the same server random as before, which my server does helpfully, and I send the same encrypted PMS, then the server will happily decrypt that, and it'll use it to compute the exact same keys that we had before. Now, I still don't get to know what those keys are because I can't decrypt the PMS, which will make it hard for me to take place in the encrypted communications. But I do have captured traffic from the last time, and so this allows me to get up to no good. Since this is all deterministic now, I can try multiple times and I can see how the server might respond differently for different inputs, and I can start to form a dictionary of its responses. For example, if I know that the client was visiting the account balance page, and there is no such page on my site, there are no accounts, there's no money, it's just my home page. But then I would know what encrypted message to send in order to load the account balance, and I wouldn't be able to read the response, but I'd be able to tell if it was different. and therefore that the account balance had changed. Anyway, TLS has built-in protection against this kind of replay attack. We make sure that encryption is not deterministic. This is where this thing CBC comes in. It stands for cipher block chaining. AES is a block encryption function. It takes a message which is always 16 bytes and a key and produces a ciphertext that's always 16 bytes by scrambling it up. There's of course a decryption mode where you pass the same key and the ciphertext you got before, and you can get back the original message. That's the whole point. So if you just break your message up into these 16-byte blocks and run AES, this is called the electronic codebook. You basically get a big substitution cipher, and you could start working on a decryption dictionary like we discussed. To make encryption less deterministic, what we're going to do is mix some unpredictable data in with the encrypted data so that if we encrypt the same data more than once, we don't get the same result. We just undo that during decryption. In CBC mode, we use the encrypted previous block as that unpredictable data, and we mix it using XOR. So now, as long as the previous block was different, I'm going to get a different result of encryption, even if I'm encrypting the same data over and over. And that's good if you like security. To get the chain started, we need something for the very first block. The server needs to come up with 16 bytes to use, and they need to send it to the client so that the client can get the process started. This is called the initialization vector, or IV, and it's 16 bytes. The server is supposed to pick a random initialization vector again, but we can defeat CBC mode by choosing a constant value like 0. 0 is a good choice because XORing 0 with something doesn't change it, so we can actually just skip that step. So now the first block is back to being a deterministic substitution cipher, vulnerable to various attacks. Blocks after that will have some cascading randomness in them. But we can do worse than this. What if we choose an IV with a particular algebraic relationship to the data that's being encrypted that we're going to XOR it with? Like, say, the identity relationship. When I XOR the data with itself, I always get 0, and then always encrypt 0. The second block's going to get XORed with something weird, whatever 0 encrypts to. But don't worry, we can make this even dumber at some expense. Normally, TLS sends messages in records which can be up to 16 kilobytes in size. So the first of 1,000 blocks will be encrypted as 0. So to maximize insecurity, HTTPV just ends the record after the first block. Let's look at an actual packet capture from my website. Here are 3 complete TLS records from the server, each containing only one encrypted block. Each record starts with a 5-byte header, and then the 16-byte initialization vector in green. Since we choose the initialization vector to be the plaintext data itself, you can easily read the secret payload within the packet. After that in red is the encrypted 0. That's the same every single time. And then after that is 32 bytes of additional overhead. All told, each record is a nice round 69 bytes for a 16-byte payload, which gives us a solid compression ratio of 1:4 or so. One nice thing about this is that because the encryption doesn't even depend on the data, I'm always encrypting 0 and this deterministic overhead, I can actually encrypt ahead of time before I even know what page I'm going to return. And Mac security people will also appreciate that this is provably immune to side channel attacks like timing and power attacks, because the data does not even need to be present during encryption. Once you start doing Mac security, you quickly become embarrassed at how slow and expensive the whole thing has become. So TLS has various extensions to make life more livable within its hostile architecture. Speaking of hostile architecture, I want to show you my favorite architectural idea in Pittsburgh's East Liberty Whole Foods. This is just beautiful. In a newly built building, a triumph of Dadaist human factors. Anyway, what were we oh right, the TLS session ticket extension. So while users are waiting for the web page, TLS is doing this back and forth of the handshake, and this involves several round trips, each of which has to be done in series. To address this, during a normal handshake, the server can present to you a session ticket, which allows you to resume that same session later. The server chooses what the session ticket is. It might indicate a row in a database containing the master secrets for that session. The client saves this along with their random numbers. And if they want to reconnect, they can present that same session ticket in their client hello and might be able to skip most of the steps of the handshake. Better than using a database on the server is to do this harder drive style. The session ticket contains all of the information, but encrypted with a key that only the server knows. When the client sends it back to the server can decrypt it and have all the information it needs to resume. The best way, which is what HTTPV does, is to just use the raw master secrets as the session ticket. This is provably optimal. The server is completely stateless. It doesn't even need those encryption keys. And the client can't tell what's happening. It's just bytes. So this works in all web browsers. Also, because the server is stateless, there doesn't even need to have been an earlier connection. Anyone can just make up a session ticket, which will result in the keys of their choice, and the server will accept it. Oh, and did I mention that the session tickets are sent during the handshake unencrypted? So this allows deriving the keys yourself so you can decrypt another person's session, or you can resume their session later, or while it's in progress. Nice. There are several other Easter eggs in HTTPV, like full Heartbleed support. Heartbleed was like the most exciting bug for security people, so much so that it has its own logo. Speaking of logos and Easter eggs, I just made this logo for HTTPV. I have a real soft spot for logos that hide a clever Easter egg. Like here I've hidden a nice broad smile to illustrate HTTPV's friendliness in the face of toxicity. By the way, you guys know about the Easter egg hidden in the FedEx logo? This is amazing. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Yeah, it's an Easter egg in a spoon. Brilliant. HTTPV does have at least one limitation that I know about. On a fresh-born Linux installation, tools like curl will refuse to connect to my website. This is an OpenSSL max security issue. Basically, there's a bug in the protocol if you support this obscure renegotiation feature, which I don't. And even though I don't have this bug, OpenSSL insists that my server announces that it knows about this bug in an extension. And I don't do that. It would be really easy to add it, actually. But keeping scripts from scraping my site might actually be beneficial. It is a bit rich for curl to act all secure, because I'm pretty sure the main use for this program is to freebase shell scripts straight from githabusercontent.com by piping it into a root shell. You do this with the -o- command line option, which is an emoticon illustrating the user with their head down on the desk and their arms splayed out in a pose of complete submission. But I don't think this message is really here to protect users. Its real purpose is to shame people like me into upgrading our servers. This kind of shame is a common tool of toxic max security. They put the red badge of discourage on my website and then ask users to contact me to fix it. They give a confusing error message to the poor NASA scientists who are just trying to keep GPS working. But a potential antidote to toxins is a kind of openness. In her blockbuster 2012 TED Talk, vulnerability researcher Brené Brown had this to say.
And so I pulled back out of the research and thought, I need to figure out what this is. And it turned out to be shame. And shame is really easily understood as the fear of disconnection. Is there something about me that if other people know it or see it, that I won't be worthy of connection?
Indeed. When OpenSSL sees unsafe legacy renegotiation about my server, it deems it unworthy of connection. I dare say this metaphor is really working out.
Cryptography is not the enemy. I actually love cryptography. I read this whole damn book in college. But because of its unmatched ability to deny access, it does often show up as a tool of computer science traders. Like the team that decided I need to pay $150 a year to sign software to put it in the App Store. Or whatever jerk put RFID tags on the water filters for my fridge, like a sort of drinking rights management. Good technologists should be interested in cryptography and the power it brings, but also careful about what they might set into motion. Can you think of anyone that demands to see documentation that you're allowed to exist? Like the Customs and Border Patrol, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. Why do we have two of those? Paw Patrol? Are these the good guys? So as much as I love cryptography, perhaps there should be some subfield of computer science heresy that seeks to counterbalance toxic max security. Because it seeks to strip the cryptography that we formerly applied, we could call it gymnography, from the Greek gymnos, meaning naked. In any case, I can attest that it's a real subversive joy to artfully botch security software. I welcome your contributions to the field. Papers, please. No, like self-own. I didn't actually pay anything. Just my time. Yes, as usual. Yes.
Gotta go. Oh man. Help me.